We're here in Washington, D.C., breaking down everything for the inauguration and Trump's second administration and looking back at what has previously happened and how we got here. I'm Jill Savage, along with Matthew Peterson and Chris Bedford. And joining us special here today is Richie McGinniss. He is the author of Riot Diet. And you may remember him from the Kyle Rittenhouse trials as well. So let's go ahead and just dive in, because what we're seeing now with this inauguration and everything that is happening around this, January 6th of it all, a little different than 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So take us through some of these differences that you've definitely noticed.
Well, the only thing that was similar between this inauguration and the last one in 2020 was the amount of security that was there. There were actually many more people out and about than during Joe Biden's. Joe Biden's felt like the Baghdad Green Zone. But, January 6th was obviously a big
conversation. There's not even any attendees at Joe Biden's inauguration. There's a couple people in masks. I remember it was a strange.
I actually didn't even get through security in time to see the actual inauguration.
It's incredible how much they make you walk and all that. But it's also, the whole mood of the country, it seems, has changed. Your book is a bit of a time capsule, thank God, for now at least, into a moment when cities were burning. Police seem to have forgotten how to deal with riots, or their hands were tied. Maybe you can give me some insight on that. There was fire everywhere. People were trying to call it mostly peaceful. It clearly wasn't. There were militias out in the street, which sometimes were necessary to protect private property. The police were unwilling to do. Walk us through a little bit of the book, I suppose, and what made you write it, and the perspective that you bring that was just... You and I have talked about this for a long time. So lacking in so much of the other coverage that you see of that period of American history.
Absolutely. When I first pitched the book like 2 years ago, actually all the publishers told me that Trump wasn't going to make it through the primaries because of January 6th.
But he's done here.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
over.
And it was amazing to see that transformation. And I wrote the book with the expectation that was history because the Trump era wasn't over yet. And I was at January 6th. And while everybody was trying to spin it up into, Pearl Harbor or 9/11 moment, I'm not saying that it was pretty, but it certainly wasn't in terms of level of violence anywhere near anything like that. And it's been used as a cudgel against Trump supporters since then. And you can only hit somebody over the head and pull the wool over their eyes for so long before the truth starts to come out. And the weird thing for me was the feds never contacted me. I was in there on January 6th, and then they never contacted me for, hey, did you see anything out there? And I think that's because they wanted a narrow lens. They didn't want to have any more evidence than what they needed to prove their narrative. And we're seeing that fall apart.
No, they didn't use any of my footage either. The only people who did was reporters who reached out because of different lawsuits that they were involved in over assaults that happened. The feds never reached out to me, but you were congressionally press passed at the time,
I
right?
was. I got it. Actually, I was so well prepared. The first question I had was, how did I get from streaming the Trump speech in Georgetown? We had 5 reporters on the ground, and there was no internet out there, so I was streaming it from home. I found out that the cops were running around, and I got down there via Uber and then skateboard with a bulletproof helmet.
Let me see.
Well,
you have
Glenn
it?
Beck,
Yeah.
no, Glenn Beck.
Let's get some props.
So after Kenosha, Glenn Beck bought me this bulletproof backpack, which is now my safety blanket. And I had this backpack.
That's bulletproof?
Yeah. It's
Is
got
it
little
heavy?
Kevlar. No, it's not. It's actually great. I highly recommend
Get one.
it.
Send the kids to school in these.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I had my bulletproof vest and my ballistic helmet and my gas mask. And I arrived on the Western Front just before 2 p.m.
The cops love to see that bulletproof vests and gas masks.
Yeah,
on reporters,
exactly.
Right?
So my credential got swiped because I was so well prepared. They assumed I had to be some scurrilous agitator. But that was my first question. How come there's only 140 Capitol Police officers defending this line with 10,000 people behind me? And it just made no sense why D.C., a place where the cops are prepared, unlike Kenosha, where the cops actually know how to deal with these protests. I've seen abortion marches with more police presence and a better perimeter around the Capitol than what I saw on January 6th. But that's my open question that I still have.
Yeah. Say a little bit more about what you think the future holds. The importance of the pardons can't be understated, I think. But we're not done with this,
Yeah.
as you point out. So what do you want to see happen next?
Well, I want to see an investigation into who was making the decisions for what security should be there. obviously the head of the Capitol Police resigned immediately afterwards, and there's still a lot of open-ended questions as far as like who made the decisions for that perimeter to be set up. Because
We've learned so much from Nancy Pelosi's daughter,
but
who filmed it for us, thankfully.
And that's the same thing that we saw in Kenosha. It's the same thing I saw in Seattle at the Chaz. It's the same thing I saw in Portland, which is these Democrat mayors and governors effectively create a power vacuum because of political gamesmanship. And it's like, we don't want Trump and his, fascist troops in here, so we're going to just capitulate an entire police precinct to the protesters. And what's the first thing they did in the Chaz? They armed guards and they put up barriers.
Yeah.
Courts.
They didn't put up a
Tribunals.
wall. They did not put up a wall because that would be Trump.
Can't be a wall.
Yeah,
a big,
definitely not a
beautiful
wall.
wall. No,
Just
no,
barriers.
can't
It's
have
like
that.
a lesson in political philosophy and like 5 easy steps on a thread. You
Lord
just
of
see,
the
like,
Flies.
It is Lord of the Flies, and it's called Lord of the Chaz, that chapter. And
Oh, that's
it's-
fantastic.
And that's exactly what happens in a power vacuum. Is that it's the strongest person or the most well armed, who will prevail. And like in the Chaz, there's a moment in the book where Shelby and I, my coworker at the time, Shelby Talcott.
Who I used to not let cover
Yeah,
riots,
yeah.
and she's been rubbing it in my face ever since as a great riot reporter.
Yeah, and Jeff told me when I went out there with her that if she ends up with a black eye and you're not in the ICU, I'll kill you myself, is what my boss told me when we went out there. But there was a kid who was manning the checkpoint as an armed guard with a Desert Eagle, 50 caliber Desert Eagle, from a needlepoint belt, swinging around, flagging anybody who was close enough. And I said, "Nice holster, man." He said, "My mom made it for me."
Oh, well, that's a
And
touching
that tells you
story.
everything you need to know about like those kinds of situations. It's like these idiots who bring the guns and violence ultimately prevails.
Yeah,
One of the things sorry, Jim.
I was just going to say, if we go back to present day, they didn't bring out the guns yesterday. They brought out a guillotine though yesterday for the inauguration.
Bunch of theater kids.
Anywhere that Donald Trump goes, there's going to be protests.
Yeah.
How do you see this playing out in his second term?
Well, I've said in 2016, I think naively, that there was going to be a reckoning in the media, and people were going to say, "Well, why did we get to this point? Maybe the Democrats had been offshoring jobs for the last 20 years. Maybe that might have something to do with it." But I didn't see that reckoning, and I thought, oh, maybe the second time around we'll see that. But from what I've seen so far, like that guillotine was way bigger than the noose, which actually is like this big. You see the noose that was everybody's been broadcasting for the last 4 years on January 6th for Hang Mike Pence. That guillotine was like 10 feet taller, and you only saw it on a couple of Twitter feeds.
Doesn't
And
fit the narrative.
Yeah, it doesn't fit the narrative.
One of my
exactly.
favorite things about your writing is in this book is that the stories that you tell, the little interesting tidbits, the personalities, the characters, the things which even in dark moments are like kind of frankly funny. But I'm going to ask you the same question that Megyn Kelly asked, and the same question that our publisher Neil Patel asked when he reviewed the footage. How did you end up with your shirt off in the U.S. Capitol?
Well,
You and the shaman.
me and the shaman were the only ones I know of that were shirtless. I think maybe we were both libeled by the New York Times, but the second book is coming out soon, and I cover exactly how I got 3 corrections from the New York Times. You'll have to stay tuned for that. But I'll just ask the viewer, I'll answer your question with another question. Do you know how good it feels after you've been pepper sprayed 70 times to take off your shirt in the middle of January when all of your skin is burning? And I had a bulletproof vest on, and it was stuck underneath there. So I had to get the vest off mostly. Like my skin was burning, and I lost my phone. So I went up to the window, tapped on the window to ask the police if my phone got swept into the closing of the east doors.
Is my cell phone in there?
Yeah, and I'm saying phone, but in that moment, the New York Times photographer took the photo, and that image, it looks like I'm saying the F word, and they said a rioter who punched a door. And the door, I landed when I got knocked over as they closed the doors and pepper sprayed everybody. I landed on a crowbar. And so they were implying that I had, cracked the window with my fist that's this thick. And
thick glass,
and so, that image was turned into, I looked in that moment like that image of the knuckle dragging Trump supporter but they relied on my footage and my testimony in Kenosha, after Kenosha, but then they call me a rioter.
You
who
should have
punched the
taken
door.
my advice. I wish I'd been with you. When the pepper spray comes, get out of the way.
Oh, well, that's my job. Is to
Chris,
pepper
I
spray.
dodged.
Chris Bedford, simple tips and tricks to keep you safe.
I'm not going to trust the
Yeah, we
feds
can add
to tell me
another
what
one today.
happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're not going to trust the feds to tell you what happened on January 6th. Somebody's got to be up in there.
That's true.
I got a little too close, apparently.
Tell us, remind our viewers the name of the book, where they can buy it. And what's your favorite place for them to buy it?
So Riot Diet is the name of the book, and you can get it on the Bezos Boutique, or you can order it from your local bookstore. I understand people wanting to support their local bookstores, but the
Yes.
honest truth is that the Bezos Boutique, for an independent author, I started my own publishing company, Pigeon Press, so you can go to pigeonpress.com as well. It's actually better to sell it on Amazon. You make more money than you do wholesale.
Well, that's actually good to hear.
So if you want to support your bookstore, I understand. You can also get it.
I don't.
Order it there as well. Okay.
And
Exactly.
if you want it simple, easy, and just one click away,
Yeah.
the Bezos Bookstore. Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Richie, for joining us.